Hey folks, Jonathan here. Long day of working today, and I've done some videos. We've done a first start on the Camaro, which you've probably already watched because I'm uploading it now. And I've done a video on the engine that we pulled out of the Mercedes, and unfortunately, somehow I ran out of space on the camera, so I ran in and went ahead and saved it, and then erased it off the camera, the card in the camera, and turns out I didn't save it. I thought I'd saved it. So I lost it all. But so it's late, uh, been dark for a couple hours now, but I figured I'd come out here and go ahead and do another video and talk a little bit of about the engine, about engines in particular. Uh, Maybe a couple ideas that I've studied on in my head for a while. But to start out, I was like everybody else, worked on small engines, go-karts, lawnmowers, weed eaters. As a matter of fact, the weed eaters I worked on was the motors were down at the bottom. I mean, old home lights. I was so young, and I was trading around for lawnmowers and go-karts and stuff, but I watched Harry Houdini when I was young, and I was really impressed with the way that he could get out of any kind of a lock or open any kind of a lock. And there's no such thing as magic, and Harry Houdini was the one that would stress that a lot. The supernatural or making things disappear. There's always a trick behind it, and so I knew there was a trick behind the lock deal. And basically, the conclusion I came to, and what I figured out, even being young, is that Harry Houdini was a master locksmith. So he could look at the outside of a lock, and especially the older locks, where they had roll pins or pins that went through, but not roll pins, but you understand what I'm talking about. But you could look at the outside of a lock and understand how it worked inside without seeing inside. So when he stuck his pick in the lock, he knew where to go, what to do, and he totally understood them. And my goal, being young, was to be the same way, except about engines. I didn't want to know how to take one apart and put it back together, or rebuild one, or anything like that, as much as I wanted to learn how it worked. And when I say how it worked, I mean 100% totally, timing, the intake stroke, exhaust stroke, compression stroke, just everything. I wanted to know everything there was to know about it. And so, I studied on it a lot, and I learned a lot, and, that's the reason that I was able to build an engine from, scratch, and build pulling tractor engines. And, the antique pulling tractor engines is probably one of the most complicated when it comes to building, engines that are. It's hard to explain, but you can't buy a single part for them. And when I'm talking antique, I'm talking about keeping the original style engine with the original style updraft carburetor. You're limited so much on stuff. You don't have counterbalance on the crankshafts. You can't get any balance out of them. I mean, it's just it's it's pretty rough to build one and make it run and make it hold together. And so I've done a lot of that, and I studied cams, for lift and duration and ramp angle and lobe separation and valve overlap and everything else. And and when it always works out when you're excited about something, or when you really want to learn something, you'll learn it. And if you're really excited about it, you'll also remember it. And so I learned everything I could learn. And in the process of that, I learned a long time ago that if you want to learn about history, you don't learn from books that was written recent. So I've gotten a lot of old books, and actually I've got to do a video on some. Richard from Kentucky had sent me a bunch of old books, engineering books, some engine books and stuff like that, steam engines, and I really enjoy reading them. And one of the reasons I'm doing my little hardware store, I'll show you here soon, but there's one section of that's going to be my little library. I'm going to have all my old books in it, and when I want some peace and quiet, and I want to be able to go out and read, that's where I'm going to go to read. And you know, I enjoy that, and I enjoy learning this stuff. But what I'm getting at, and you learn real quick from studying history, and especially the history on engines and stuff. You know, one thing is so everybody understands. The one big thing that was missing on a gasoline engine, internal combustion engine, to make it work, and it wasn't Odo or Otto, however you want to pronounce it, that, you know, designed the Otto cycle, 4-cycle. You know, every engine is based off of what he done. But it wasn't him, it was a guy, a French, I think he was actually a scientist, but his name was Roche. And he actually wrote the papers up. He was the one that determined and figured out that the compression was what was missing. You know, you could have fuel, you could have fire, you could have timing, you could have everything you needed, but if you did not have compression, your engine wasn't going to run. And he was the one that figured that out. And Otto just happened to be, or Odo was happened to be the one that actually built an engine that done that. But you know, it's one of them deals to where the right man don't get as much respect over it as what he really should. But anyway, what I'm getting to, early 1800s. I'm sorry, early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. You know, there was the industrial age. You know, when everything was being built and designed, and people have no clue how smart they were. And the more you study on it, the more you read old books, the more you realize that people, I would not doubt if they was just as smart then as they was now. And the reason I say that, you know, Chrysler built the Hemi engine, but I've got pictures of a 1902 Hemi engine, 1904 Hemi engines. I've got pictures of twin overhead cam engines. I've got pictures of roller rockers, roller lifters, you name it, and this is all early 1900 stuff. You know, 4 valves per cylinder. There's just none of this stuff is new. You know, they'll add and change stuff, but it's not, you know, when the man said 100 years ago, and I don't know who said it, but everybody kept talking about it, and well, I was told this 20 years ago, so maybe it was 120 years ago, but whatever, you know, that everything that had been invented, you know, that was going to be invented had already been invented. And, you know, it's easy to make improvements on stuff, and that's, to me, all that's happened over the years. You know, everything's been improved, nothing's been invented. I mean, you know, maybe in the computer world, but electronics world, but you know, we're still using an internal combustion engine, and no matter what you do to change it, you know, variable compression, variable valve timing, you've still got an internal compression engine or combustion engine. And one little example I'll give you, they've come out with a new engine, and I don't remember who it was, what company it is, and I wish I could tell you, but I didn't pay that much attention to the company. I paid more attention to the drawings. There's a variable compression engine out that is, it's a pretty neat engine, but as soon as I seen the drawings, you know, I said, well, this is basically a version of a lever engine. Well, a lever engine was built in the early 1900s. And to give you an example of a lever engine, okay, you got let's just take a square engine, you know, 4-inch bore, 4-inch stroke, 4-cylinder. I think 201 cubic inches. Okay, so you've got a 4-inch bore and 4-inch stroke, so you're going to have 201 cubic inches. How do you increase the cubic inches but keep the same bore and the same stroke? Now, it sounds impossible, but it's not. So you run your crank, which is 4-inch stroke, up to a lever, which would be a rod coming across, that pivots on a solid point, and then you put another rod at the end of that lever and run it up and run your cylinder above it. So even though your rod's moving 4 inches here, it could be moving up to 6 inches here, you know, at the end of that rod. So that's a lever engine, and you know, they were actually, you know, pretty successful. And so you've got a 4-inch stroke and a 4-inch bore, but you got way more than the 201 cubic inches. You know, if you figure it up, you get a lot of cubic inches out of it. And that was a successful engine that was built. Now this new engine that they're coming out with, which is a variable compression engine, is basically a lever engine with an extra movement to it. And that extra movement actually, changes your angle of your lever to be able to raise the piston higher, keep the piston lower. And that's how you vary the compression. And you don't have to move it far. And but as soon as I seen the drawings of it, it was just familiar as could be. So, that's nothing new. And as for our variable cam timing, I think that's what maybe worries everybody on this Mercedes engine. I do understand, don't get me wrong, I do understand that fuel injection is more efficient. It's dependable up to a point. And, everybody says, well, a carburetor is not dependable in comparison to a fuel injection. But let me tell you this much. If I'm alongside the road, broke down, and it's a fuel system problem, and let's say it's with the carburetor, and let's say the other vehicle's with fuel injection, I can fix the one with a screwdriver. And there's pretty much not much that you can't compensate for on a carburetor and get yourself home, as compared to a fuel injection system where you may be ordering parts and swapping stuff. And so it may be more dependable, but in the long term of it, maybe it is and maybe it ain't. But and then, the same way with the ignition system, electronic ignition, it's a good setup. It's very dependable, very nice, runs great. But if you have an ignition module go out alongside the road, you're pretty much screwed. If you have a set of points burn up alongside the road, you can get out and file them or whatever and keep going. There's advantages to the old systems. Now, you're not going to get better fuel mileage, you're not going to get more horsepower or nothing like that, but, it's easy to work on and it's cheap. And, I'd seen a mention about the standalone system, wiring system, fuel injection system for, that engine, or for, whatever engine you want to get it for. And I understand why somebody would buy that, but somebody that don't have the money to buy it, $700 to $1,000 for a system that, if you've got a choice, I guess you could, and had the money would be one thing. But, somebody that just wants to do something and don't have the money or don't want to spend the money, you don't have to do that. A sheet metal intake, a tube style intake, carburetor's cheap. You can find them used, whatever. You can still have, a decent engine or a good running engine and not have to spend that money. And my goal is to try to get people into vehicles and working on vehicles and doing projects without spending a lot of money. I've said it before in the budget deal. We're going to build an engine on a budget. Our budget's 10 grand. To me, that's not a budget. So, that's just not an option to me. And when I was, I'll give you a little story here. When I was, I guess about 19 years old, I worked at a mobile home place, and you have to excuse the rain too. Hopefully it's not too noisy. But I worked in a mobile home factory, and I actually would buy small block Chevrolet engines, and you could get them for nothing back then, or find them at the junkyard, and I would collect them up until I had enough parts to build one. I remember a company, PAW, I used to buy rebuild kits through them. You could buy, a set of bearings and a set of rings and a gasket kit, and it came with the old Detroit gasket kit. I'm sure some of you remember that. Wasn't a good Velcro kit. But, I think it was like $130, $120, something like that. But I would collect up enough parts, and then I would rebuild an engine, and with the good parts, and I would sell it, $500 a pop. And, a rebuilt engine that ran good. And believe it or not, it hasn't been that long ago, I spoke to one of the guys I sold an engine to, and he's still running it. It's just amazed me. But, and we're talking over 20 years ago. And it was in he put an old 68 Chevrolet pickup. But, fuel injection's nice. I really like it, when it's working right. I don't have the knowledge in the electronics to be able to repair it. Like needs to be. I don't have the equipment, the computers, I don't have any of that. And I got out of the mechanic part of it, about when OBD2 come out. I mean, that's when I started getting away from doing mechanic work for businesses and others. Carburetors were still around for a few years after that, but not long. And I worked on quite a few throttle bodies, but it left me, it lost me. I didn't keep up, and it wasn't because I didn't, wasn't able to. I just didn't want to. I didn't care to keep up with it. I mean, I could never afford a car that was late model anyway. When I was still driving carbureted engines, and up in the 90s and 2000s, and it was something I couldn't afford anyway. So, but as for the raining hard now. Okay, so it's been about an hour. The rain finally stopped, so I come back out. I was basically getting ready to tell you where we stood on the Mercedes engine, what the plans are. Well, for one thing, the variable valve timing. It's only on the intake cams, because it's dual overhead cam, and like I said, it's only 20 degrees. So basically what you're doing is it's set up at 20 degrees retarded, and as you accelerate it advances 20 degrees, and it works off of a solenoid. And if you put voltage to that solenoid, then it advances 20 degrees, and that's not an issue at all. We can run it fully advanced all the time and lock it in, or we can run it at idle retarded and then put a switch on the accelerator and go ahead and let it advance as we give it gas. And then as you let off the gas and you're evening out speed going down the road, it can retard back. That's not an issue whatsoever. I'm not worried a bit about that. As for fuel delivery, whether it be carburetor or fuel injected, whatever, I even thought about running a different style fuel injection system. Something that could be wired pretty easy, or something that I've got, but I've decided I want to carburate it, and I want to carburate it just to show everybody that it'll still run good carbureted. The engine has no clue what you're fueling it with, and atomized fuel is atomized fuel, whether it's coming from an injector or coming from a carburetor. With the compression, it's not going to have any detonation, or pre-ignition or spark knock issues. I've done a lot of pulling tractors. I've built a lot of fabricated manifolds, whether it be sheet metal or tube manifolds. It's not hard to deal with. The way that's set up, it's going to be an air gap manifold anyway, because the bottom of the valley is solid. There's no oil to hold in like on a Chevrolet or anything like that. So with it being an air gap, it's easier to keep cool. There'll be no issues there. There's a couple little things we'll have to do, but there's actually water ports at the front and the back, which is no issue whatsoever to take care of, and it's going to turn out just fine, and it's going to run good. And just because something was fuel injected don't mean it has to stay fuel injected. And I do understand that it's going to be more efficient and stuff with fuel injection, but it's sort of like my old wreckers, my old rollbacks I run. I've got some old trucks, and they're not as efficient as the new trucks or my newer truck, but excuse me. I would rather have a truck that ran and drove and I could easily fix if something breaks than to have to worry about whether, just being efficient. And, sometimes dependability is more important than efficiency. And, electronics is dependable to a certain extent. And, you're still going to have issues, still going to have problems. So, anyway, we're going to just take this engine back to an old school style, and you know, it will work, and I have no plans to spend a lot of money on this. You know, so far, you know, I gave $100 for the car. I'm going to make money off the car, so I'll have, you know, negative money in the engine. Uh, we're going to do the engine with the transmission that's on it, and just to go ahead and get it fired up running. I'll show you that it runs good. I'm not going to do this yet. We'll give it a little bit of time. I've got some other, you know, plenty of other stuff I need to be on and work on. But, you know, we will take some time to do that eventually. And mostly because, you know, I like proving to myself that I can do stuff. I mean, it really don't matter to me what other people think about it. You know, I don't like negative comments and stuff like that, but, you know, and I know most of the comments on this particular issue has not been negative anyway. I mean, just suggestions and stuff like that. But, you know, like I said, I have no doubt that it would be nice to have it back fuel injection, but, you know, finance-wise, I want to do a manifold. I want to do a carburetor. I think we can do it and make it look good. I think you may be surprised when it's done. So, anyway, sorry for the long-winded video, you know, and I just wanted to touch on a few things. I do want to tell one more thing. With studying the history of, you know, some of the old books and stuff, you know, you come up on some stuff that really surprises you. One thing that they were working with that I don't know why we're not working with now, magnetic driven transmission. Why, and maybe they are, maybe I'm wrong and they are, but I don't know why they haven't used electromagnets to actually drive a transmission yet. You know, you do away with any kind of, not only friction from a clutch, but you do away with a torque converter, which, you know, loses power. Well, of course a magnetic would too, but you could vary the speed by how much magnet attraction from, let's say, you know, let's say you put your magnets in your torque converter, from how much magnet attraction you have from it to the flywheel without them being mounted together. I don't know if anybody's familiar with a hot water pump for like a boiler system, to where the motor runs and it runs a magnet, and the pump does not have a shaft running through it. You know, it's two separate bodies, and that way you'd never have a pump seal or anything go out on it. But that's how a, you know, hot water pump would be driven. And I think the technology should be there with magnets, especially electromagnets. You know, you can go to the junkyard and see them pick a car up, and or see them pick a bunch of scrap up. And the other thing, and this is just to get everybody thinking, you know, that messes with engines and stuff like that. You know, they experimented with gunpowder engines years ago, and before they was able to figure out that compression was, you know, the big issue that was keeping them from having an engine running. And you know, gunpowder has got its own oxidizer. In other words, you can fire a gun underwater, you can fire a gun in space. You don't need any outside oxygen. And something that I've always thought about, you know, driving down the roads a lot and the rollback and wrecker, you know, I don't listen to radio a lot, so I'm usually thinking about things. And I've yet to figure out why they haven't, or why, or maybe it's something, you know, someone may be working on, but why wouldn't you have a fuel, and they make liquid fuels that have oxidizers, and build a self-contained engine. In other words, instead of putting gas in, sucking air in, and shooting out the exhaust, why would you not use an oxidized fuel to run the engine, pipe the exhaust through a cooler and through a filter system, and then run it right back in the engine and keep it self-contained? And it would be losing zero pollution. And you know, that's something I've often thought about, you know, and I know you've got carbon dioxide, you're going to have a lot of, you know, gases that you're going to have to deal with that, you know, that's coming from the exhaust, but you don't need that exhaust to be clean to go back through the engine. You know, you don't need it to have oxygen back in it if you have an oxidizer in your fuel. And that's something that I've thought about a lot that I can't quite figure out. I haven't studied on it enough to know, you know, what the effects would be or anything like that, but it's just something to think about. You know, the gunpowder engines, you know, didn't work out well. But like I said, there is liquid uh, oxidizers now, or liquid fuels with oxidizers in them. But anyway, I appreciate everybody watching. If you made it this far, you've probably done good. And we'll get on that engine sometime. No hurry. You know, it's one of them deals. You know, we're slowly getting videos up, and not working quite as much on the projects right now because we're doing some cleanup. We're doing some straightening out, trying to get everything ready for the next one-day hot rod build or rat rod build, whatever you want to call it. And we are doing the Skyhawk with the V8. And if anybody wants to check out, go to Facebook, search Explosion Motors, and join the little group there I have for that. You'll get to see some pictures of some old engines that, you know, that have overhead cams and stuff like that. Hemi engines from, you know, 1902, 1904. Just, you know, join, and I'll, of course, let anybody in that wants in. It's a private, you know, sort of group or forum. But anyway, I do appreciate everybody watching, and till next time, bye.